Okay, we're going to start our first panel discussion right now. My name is Edwin Chan. Thank you for coming to the summit today, and I'm very excited to introduce our moderator, which is Karyl Matsumoto. So the session that we're going to host today is Immigrant Perspective from the Bayside to the Coastside. And Councilmember Matsumoto was first elected to the City Council in South San Francisco in 1997. And when she was first elected, she was only the second woman and the second Asian in the city's 105-year history to serve on the City Council. Karyl is a native Californian and has lived in South City for 36 years. And her community experience includes having served and been a member of over 30 civic and nonprofit boards, commissions, and committees. So please welcome our friend, my neighbor from across the street, and my City Council member, Karyl Matsumoto.
Bring our panelists out. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. And you're probably, I'm just going to do a short plug. You're probably wondering why me and this immigrant as a native Californian, but I do like to share this story. I grew up during wartime, and I'm, as Dr. Jimenez says, I'm third generation. Took us that long to run for an elected office, but during the war, Japanese Americans were, about 120,000 of us were herded into concentration camps with barbed wire fences and guards. After the war, when we were released, they wouldn't rent to, quote, Japs. My father was born in Los Angeles, a graduate of UCLA. My mother was born in Salt Lake City and graduated from UC Berkeley. And there were no civil rights laws as we speak today. So I have great empathy for the immigrant experience. Like many, we lived in fear. We were looked down upon. We were treated as third-class citizens. So my hat's off to what you're going through today. So let me go on and introduce my panel. Chike Nwoffiah is a graduate of the University of Lagos, Columbia University's Graduate School of Business INM program, and the Hollywood Film Institute. He is the founding executive director of Silicon Valley African Film Festival. He is also the president of Reese's Media Group, a full-service media production and consulting firm based in California and Cape Town, South Africa, and is known as an award-winning filmmaker and director. He is, in year 2000, he was listed as one of the top 10 most influential African Americans in the San Francisco Bay Area by City Flight magazine. Chike has served on several regional and national arts policy and grant review panels, and is a senior fellow of the American Leadership Forum, Silicon Valley. Chike, thank you for joining us. Next we have Karolina Soto, is finishing her high school career at Sequoia High School, having been an active member in substantive clubs such as the Dream and Key Clubs and STEM. Demonstrating ambition and talents, Karolina is a vocal leader in the North Fair Oaks Youth Initiative, where students collaborate with other students and community organizations to build a stronger, more inclusive North Fair Oaks community. The program's most recent success was the outstanding Oye Conference, a day dedicated to workshops and innovation for Latino youth and families, always aspiring to a better day in spite of life's trying circumstances. Karolina plans to attend a college of her choice in the fall. Karolina, thank you. Kim Lay is the CEO and founder of A2Q2, a special ops team for accounting and finance departments. A2Q2 helps high-growth companies solve challenges in accounting processes and systems, data analytics, and internal controls. Kim's humble beginnings are the foundations of the firm's purpose of helping the underdogs win. She and her family were among the boat people from Vietnam who escaped to Malaysia. Kim started her public accounting career with Arthur Andersen and stayed until 2002. From the experience, Kim decided to start her own consulting company. Kim's personal struggles framed the way she handles professional challenges today. She says, "I have always had to work to catch up and work smarter to kick butt. So I thrive on challenges and achievements. When you're not living in a refugee camp, everything is easy." Kim, thank you. Now, I'm going to ask them several questions, and the first is going to be, please share with us your story as an immigrant, beginning with your decision to come to the United States, your journey, and how you adapted and were treated. In it, if you would include any struggles, challenges, failures, and successes you had in making a new life for yourself. And as I told you backstage, the floor is yours. You don't have to answer this. You're on your own.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I grew up homeless because in 1978, my mother, my younger brother, and I, in the dead of night, escaped from Saigon at that time. We took a rickshaw and went to a riverside community or village and got onto a small fishing boat. And from that boat, we spent 7 days, didn't know where we were going. And I remember at that time, it was just this tiny boat and sitting on top of that boat, looking outside in this massive blue sea and not seeing anything. And at the end of that 5 to 7 days, it felt forever because we had run out of food and we were only living on rice and salt and pepper to begin with. And the engine on our boat had failed. And so I just remember that desperation that you feel when you don't have a way out and there's nowhere to go. And finally we spotted land and we all hop off the boat, and our engine had actually died as well, so we were just drifting along. And we spent a year in this refugee camp in Malaysia, and it was a haven to us. I remember living on dirt floors. The walls were thatched with leaves that we found. It was a blue tarp that we lived under, and that was great because we were actually the lucky ones who made it across the ocean. And I also remember my brother. There was so much mosquitoes and lice and bugs that we actually had to shave my 4-year-old brother's head just to get rid of all of that. And a year later, we were so fortunate to have been sponsored by a church to come to the U.S. And when we got here, we were sharing a house. It was like 1 room, 1 bed, the 3 of us, with another family. They were a Vietnamese family. And I remember I learned English watching Sesame Street. And this is someone, a professor at Stanford had mentioned, and even Mr. Gupta had mentioned, a lot of that socialization happens when you're outside. And I remember there was a day when I was sitting at the sofa watching the TV, and that family that we were renting the house from, they were also Vietnamese. And they would actually speak to each other in English because they didn't want to hear what we were saying. They didn't want me or my family to understand what they were saying. And as I was watching Sesame Street, something they said, I actually understood it, and that light bulb goes off. And for the longest time, I'd felt like such a stranger, so unwanted. And finally, to be part of that conversation, even if I wasn't included in it, I could actually understand it. And it was such a lightening moment for me. And my mother worked as a dishwasher. She did manual labor. She did whatever it is that she needed to support us as we were living here. And I will always remember she had always said to me, the only way you're going to get out of this poverty cycle is if you go to college and you get an education. And unfortunately, she didn't have a professional education herself. So other than that advice to get education, there was nothing else that she could provide, no guidance, no direction. my mother did something where she thought it would be really helpful for us. She married a man who she thought would be a great provider, who would help us as we struggled and assimilated in this country. And unfortunately, what turned out is that we continued to be homeless throughout that period, because whenever he would be upset with us, whenever they had major arguments, he would kick us out of his house. And we ended up living in my mom's van occasionally until they made up and then we could come back. And that made a very deep impression on me, because I said I would never put myself in that situation ever again, to be so helpless or to not have hope. And so when I graduated high school in Tucson, $500 to my name, I went to Arizona State University. Two major reasons. It was super, super cheap. I was in state, and it was a way I could get out of my current situation. And that was the best time in my life at that point, because I ended up rooming with 4 Mexicans. I was the 5th person, and we were all immigrants, and we were trying to make our way very similar in terms of how do we get an education to break out of our cycles. And it was a 2-bedroom apartment, and at one point I volunteered because there wasn't enough room for an extra bed. And so I volunteered that I'll sleep on the floor if I could get reduced rent, and that's how I put myself through school. And the one focus I had in the 4 years that I spent there was, I'm going to get out of this, and I'm going to get out, and I'm going to get a job so that I can support my family. And I was so fortunate that when I did get out, I discovered this whole field called public accounting. And so I went to work for a firm that many of you maybe used to be aware of. It's Arthur Andersen. And when I got there, I just could not believe the opportunities, the world of opportunities that were available out there in terms of the business and the professional environment. And in 2000, during the dot-com boom, I transferred from Phoenix and came out to Silicon Valley. And you cannot imagine my surprise when I walked into that Arthur Andersen office in San Jose, and I looked around, and all these Asians. In the Phoenix office, there were 3 minorities. There was an Indian, Alpana Patel. There was another Asian guy and a Chinese guy, and there was me. And that was diversity there. So imagine coming to Silicon Valley, and you open the doors, and half of the people, you can see just different colors and different flavors of everything. It's such eye-opening. And that was what sold me on Silicon Valley, was the diversity and the pace. And roll forward, May of 2002, I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, and Arthur Andersen was collapsing. And so for those who didn't keep up at that time in terms of business news, Enron had happened, there was this big scandal, and Arthur Andersen was shutting its doors. And I was literally starting my maternity leave in May, and I had this deep depression, because I literally thought the same process. I'm thinking, I'm going to raise my child homeless the way my mother did, and it's very irrational when you're college educated, you have all these high skills, and yet the first thing that came to mind for me was that I can't support a child who's going to hire a pregnant person walking around? The job market at that time, if some of you may remember, was not very good at all. And so that was really one of my midlife crises. And you roll forward a year later, I did get a job, and I went to work for a company where I brought along some friends. And I call myself a recovering accountant and a reluctant entrepreneur, because a year later, as I was working at this company, I found out that my 2 friends, who were also educated but from different countries, had come here on a visa. And because their paperwork, because Andersen collapsed and the new company that hired them, the paperwork didn't go through, their visas were getting pulled, and they'd have to leave the country and then figure out a way to come back to work. And my husband, who's always been a great entrepreneur, has said to me, why don't you go start this company and figure a way to save them, figure a way to get their visa? And that's how my company got started. was I went and set up this company. I applied and figured the ways around immigration and applied for visas for my friend. And so I am definitely here through that immigrant route, and along the way, it's all the immigration issue and where we belong and how we contribute to society has always been a recurring theme.
Wow. That's a tough act to follow. As you've been told, my name is Chike Nwoffiah. I come from Nigeria. I come from the Igbo ethnic group of Southeast Nigeria. And I've been in Silicon Valley for 20-something years. And the journey to Silicon Valley actually started after college in my home country. And then I was moving to grad school in Europe and happened to have run into a senior vice president of a biotech company from somewhere called Palo Alto. And we had an intense argument. I used to be very much into politics and those kinds of things. And I will always defend and try to educate people on Africa, anywhere, any chance I had. And I sensed, because outside the continent, oftentimes Africa is so much reduced to almost a village. People think that, you run into people and they say, oh my gosh, you're from Africa. I say, yeah. And they tell me about this African they went to college with and wondered if I knew the person. So in any case, in this conversation with this wonderful man who has since become my mentor, he asked if I'd come to the United States before. I said no, and I didn't have any intention of going to the United States. But short story was after that conversation, he said, well, if you ever wanted to, maybe you could come try it out, and maybe you have management traineeship programs and all that. And 6 months later, I was in Palo Alto working as a corporate strategic planner, reporting to him, and subsequently, decided to stay. For me, in terms of experience as an immigrant in this country, ties back to the comment I was making about the misperception, misunderstanding, and misconceptions about where I come from. I grew up as Chike Nwoffiah, the son of my father. When I left the shores of my country, as I was arriving into San Francisco, all of a sudden, I was no longer me. I was now black. Nobody ever called me black in my life until I arrived in the United States. And so it was really shocking that I was being referred to not even by my name, but just by some color. And that's not to say that I was oblivious of all of that, but it's just that having to have that direct relationship with that characterization was very shocking. Subsequently, I transitioned, and I'm still moving from being black to being African, representing the whole continent. And these kinds of things you encounter, in as much as they might sound little, are very unsettling. When you turn on the television and everything about where you come from is a depiction of abject poverty, is a depiction of desperate conditions, is a depiction of a whole continent on its knees and begging. And it's frightening because I turn around and I say to myself, geez, is this where I come from? I never, and then people encounter you and ask if you live in huts and if you have, if you have lunch with lions and these are serious questions that people really ask, and they want you to explain and tell them. And people say, how do you say hello in African as a language? And so one began to feel, and which ties into what I'm doing today in the media and all that, and the film festival that I run, it became obvious to me that I might as well embrace this because there's no running away from it. But I needed to find a way to see this as opportunities to educate, to teach. And for a lot of us, you get entrusted with this thing, whether you like it or not, where you have to explain where you come from, where you have to explain your heritage. And somebody says, oh, you speak English. When did you learn? And well, Nigeria was colonized by the British, just as the United States was. And, language of instruction and commerce and all of that is all in English. But then they still can't wrap their heads around that. So anyway, my journey, and hopefully we'll have more opportunities to, go a little bit deeper because I don't want to hog up the time, is a journey for me, my immigrant experience is an experience that has moved from the personal to the collective in search of an identity that I owned, but then was taken away from me, and then an identity entrusted on me and given to me. So when you arrive into the United States, as I do, a person of this skin color, wherever you come from, you have your own identity, but then the society gives you one that you must take, and you have no choice. And I've seen colleagues of mine fall apart trying to reconcile that identity. Luckily for people like myself, it's an identity that I've come to embrace, take on, and my journey here on out has always now been to connect with my brothers and sisters and cousins that are in the diaspora, and so that all of us can move forward on this common journey that is entirely ours. And so being born on the continent and meeting brothers and sisters from the United States whose ancestors came here since 1619, we have all forged one identity. And so my journey as an immigrant is not just me, it's now a collective. Thank you.
All right, I was born in a small town called Caleta de Campos in Michoacán, Mexico, and I was brought to this country at the age of 1. And when I was brought to this country, I was brought along with my 2 older sisters, and we ended up living in this really small studio with my grandma. And allow me to say again the word studio, because we did not have any bedrooms. It was just a little place with the bathroom, kitchen, and living room that were all connected. And at that time, there was about 7 people living in that small studio, and how we managed not to kill each other, I don't even know. But a few years later, my grandmother passed away from cancer, and it was the first time I actually knew what the meaning of death was. I remember the night that she was getting, that her family members came to keep watch on her, I walked up to her and I kept tugging at her shoulder, yelling over and over again, "Despierta," but she never replied. And after that, my dad decided it was time to move out, and I was very excited because we were gonna move out. I had this idea of actually living in a house, of having my own bedroom and even my own bed, because up to that point, I had shared a bed with my 2 older sisters. So my 5-year-old self made a promise that when I did get a room to myself, I would put up a bunch of strawberry scented stickers all over the walls and like sniff them before I went to bed. But to my disappointment, we ended up moving to another studio in the same neighborhood. So that was really disappointing for me, or for my 5-year-old self. But I remember years later, we kept living in the same studio, and I entered high school, and that's when I learned what being undocumented really was. I remember I was sitting next to my mom one day, and I was seeing the news, and I heard that hundreds of illegal aliens had been deported thanks to a checkpoint. And to that point, I didn't know what the word an illegal alien meant. I always thought it was the green guys with the big eyes, so I didn't really know the term for it. So I asked my mom, and she told me that those people that they kept talking about, they were us because we had illegally come to this country. And I was more confused than ever because I didn't know that coming from another country or moving from another country was a crime. So later in 2012, President Obama passed the DACA Act, so it's the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and I was able to get it and get a California ID, and with that a social security number. So I thought I was gonna get my driver's license, I was gonna finally be independent and drive around, but there was a turning point. My family always suffered from had economical struggles, but this time it was different. The rent went up almost $200 to $300, and my dad at that time was the only one working, and he is an older man. He's about to retire in 2 years, and he was the only one working right now because if my mom did start working, they were gonna take the scholarships away from my older sister, so we couldn't let that happen. So I decided that it was time for me to get a job. So because my family situation was so bad, my parents never forced me to get the job, but I knew that we needed it. So I got the job working in the same place my dad does, and I would work 5 days a week. This was my junior year. Work 5 days a week. I would go take the bus after school, and I'd get home about 10:30, and then I'd do my homework and stay up until 1 or 2 in the morning, and then I would wake up at 6 the next day, and that was an everyday thing. And sometimes I would be so tired from work that I would not go to school because I wanted to sleep in. I kept this job because I saw that my dad really needed it. He would be outside pushing carts all day, whether it rained, whether there was sun outside. And I didn't want that for him. I didn't want him to be working that much. So I tried to help him out. And this year, the beginning of this year, my dad finally said, you need to stop working so much hours. My family said, you need to stop working so much hours because you're gonna apply to college. You have all these stuff that you also have to do. So I listened to him. I'm only working now 3 days a week. However, on the days that I do work, I try to get overtime, because I still need to help my dad out with rent. So, thank you. So, right now, I don't know if my dad, they're gonna give him his retirement money or not, because he's undocumented too. So I don't know what's gonna happen a year or two from now, but I do know that whatever does happen, I always have my family to help me and to support me. So, thank you.
Our second round of question is, we've heard your stories, and indeed they are truly moving. Do you have, I want to thank the San Mateo County. From what the Supervisor Slocum said, the county has made great strides in trying to make the lives of immigrants easier. I know we have a long way to go, not only in the county, but in the United States. My question to you is, do you have any comments on how the county can be more welcoming to immigrants? Do you have any suggestions and how we can change local policies to make the lives of immigrants less intimidating.
I'll take that one. I think one of the biggest issues that we face in Silicon Valley right now is affordable housing. We talk about a lot of the tech people who have lots of money, but most of what we need to address is affordable housing. So I volunteer on a board of an organization called Mid-Penn Housing, which does in 15 counties around here, develops, builds, and manages properties for affordable housing for low income or extreme low income. And that's one of, especially as I listen to Karolina's story, I can relate to as many hours as you can work, as many people can work. It's the cost of housing to us right now is extraordinarily high to be in this area. Or if you live in the outside areas and then having to commute in, imagine 2 to 3 hours each way to afford to live here. So that's something that I really think is important to all of us in the quality of living, because not only does it impact the immigrants, but it also impacts our congestion. I mean, even today coming to this, I took Caltrain because 101 and all of our freeways are so congested that it's the type of mass transportation, affordable housing are the types of issues that if we solve as a community and as a society, I think that it would help all of us in the larger scheme as well.
Yeah, and I concur. But I just want to add something else that oftentimes when I'm in these conversations, I try to bring up because it's easy to ignore. There is also one aspect of immigrant life that I would like to call attention to, and that is loneliness. You see, to come into a country such as this that is huge and has everything already in place, so to speak, in the mind of the immigrant, and to be in the middle of a coliseum full of people and yet be all alone. To feel that you don't even know how to order the basic thing from the fast food restaurant. And we can go on and on. There is something to that creates this mental disorder for you as an immigrant that the person next to you doesn't even understand. You cannot even call a cab. You don't know where you're going. You go into the store, the way the aisles are arranged and things on the grocery, they're just basic stuff that we have an organization here now called the African Diaspora Network. And we are beginning to work with new arrivals and just work with them on basic stuff, the very basic stuff that we all ignore every day. And the thing that is important is for us to realize that we live in such a very diverse community, particularly here in the Bay Area, in San Mateo County, that practically all the world cultures are expressed here. And one thing that I think would be helpful is to find a way to magnify the importance of that so that people can feel that wherever they come from, they can actually come home to San Mateo. What it means, therefore, is if I come from whatever region of the world, when I come to San Mateo and I know that there is a little bit of an expression of my culture here, and somebody helps me plug into that, it gives me a sense, I'm able to exhale that, oh my gosh, I'm really not going to be alone here. That feeling of getting lost is a crazy feeling that we need to figure out a way to do some kind of an asset mapping of who is here, where they come from, what kind of restaurants are here that can reflect your identity, what kind of arts institutions and so forth, organizations, church services that can connect you to that which you've left and at least begin to help to give you a soft landing. And, since I agree with everything you said, I just wanted to add that layer to the conversation.
Well, I think that it might sound cliche, but yes, the welcoming aspect of having like San Mateo County welcome other people that have immigrated from different countries, it's actually very important. I know that a lot of the times we do embrace, we have, such as a museum that we had, the Immigrant Museum, a lot of you took a look at it. We do embrace this idea of being pro-Hispanic, pro whatever country you're from. But a lot of the times people that do immigrate from these countries are, like Chike said, isolated. A lot of the times even by their own people, because we do not understand even if I was born in Mexico, but I've grown up my whole life here, and I know the language. So then when these other people that come from different countries come, there is a whole different culture now that has been ingrained in me, and that is different from them. And that's why sometimes we cannot relate to each other as much as somebody that has, let's say, Mexican parents and that grew up here, like I would with them, instead of getting along with other people that are, that has just arrived from the country. So I think if we offered a society, or in San Mateo, a community that was more open to actually embracing people that have just come from different countries and having these different resources from them, I think that it could be better rather than just having, just people kind of saying, oh yeah, we do accept the Hispanic culture, the Latino culture, but we do not take a look at people who are actually from there, who cannot speak English, who have struggled so much just to be here. So,
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for sharing your stories with us. You three are truly inspirational. I'm sorry for the hurdles that you had to experience. I think from a personal perspective, as an elected, the takeaway from here is when I go back to South San Francisco, I've learned from you. I'm going to initiate some policies, and I'm sure I will have the backing of my entire council. So I hope that all of you in the audience, the takeaways when you go back to your lives, and I know many of you are immigrants, but know that there are people out there who care, and I really think we need to step up. So please put your hands together and give these three a round of applause. So that's our wrap up. Should I take questions, or since I think we're on time? Directions from someone? Do any? Yes. Yes. I'm sorry? No questions. Okay. Okay.
Chike, I just wondering about the film festival.
Yes.
What it showcases, when
All right. Okay, thank you. The question is about my film festival, and just for the records, I didn't pay him to ask that question. But thank you so much. My film festival is called the Silicon Valley African Film Festival, and as a matter of fact, it's held every October, so we're 3 weeks away. It's October 14th through the 16th, and it's in Mountain View. It is a weekend where we showcase. This year, we're showcasing 55 films from 25 African countries. It is the only festival in California that is solely focused on films made by Africans on the continent. And we bring filmmakers here. It's a celebration of Africa that I'm sure you never have seen. You visit 25 countries. There is an African market, there's live entertainment, food, as well as interaction with the filmmakers itself. And this is our 7th year, actually, of doing this. And it's really grown. The embassies are sending their reps to come. We start with a red carpet, parade of flags of all the countries in the festival, and on and on. So I'll be happy to give you more information about that and check out the website. It's called Silicon Valley African Film Festival. And yeah, come on down in 3 weeks to Mountain View.
We've heard a ton of great stories, experiences from local immigrants in our community. And I know everyone's been sitting down for a while, and we've got just a few more before lunch breaks. So we've had a chance to get some data and contextual information as well as the stories. But before we move ahead to discuss how to better meet the needs of immigrant residents in San Mateo County, we want to hear your guys' voices as well. So if you could take a few minutes to think about the obstacles and challenges you face while working with immigrants in your community, you'll find that in each packet on the right-hand side, you'll have a worksheet. And there's a small Excel worksheet. The first column is titled Challenges. And if you could just take a few minutes to write down 2 to 3 to 4 of those main challenges you face while either serving your constituent immigrants, while serving clients that are immigrants, or that you know your immigrant clients face on a day-to-day basis, we'll revisit these later on today in the breakout session. So go ahead and take 2 to 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere yet. We've got one more great panel before lunch. So 2 to 3 minutes, and I'll time you guys on that.